Welcome to the dark side of the female psyche with Michael Tsarion. Here we will be delving deeply into those dark corners of psychology that few have the courage to acknowledge, the evil that exists within the female psyche. This series aims to offer you viable solutions, resources, and potent insights that can aid you in your rehabilitation and empowerment. But be forewarned, this is a series not for the faint of heart, nor is it for the easily triggered. Rather, it is only for those courageous women who realize the severity of the hour humanity is in. This means if you're going to listen to this series, you need to be ready to take self-ownership over your reactions and your responses. Because while women do hold the power to change the world, the state and quality of that change will invariably be influenced by how well a woman knows her own psyche, how beautiful, honorable, and dignified that woman chooses to become. If you are a woman who is choosing to willfully evolve, if you are a woman who sincerely desires to master yourself, your mind, and your behavior, then the information shared throughout this series will serve you well. Welcome back, everyone, to the dark side of the female psyche. We're here with Michael for part 2 of the Perilous Idol. And yeah, I've read Quinn's book, and I'm super, super curious to see where this episode goes. Please go right ahead, Michael.
Well, thank you for that. And yes, we can always link up to that. I think we covered it was such a profound one we did a part 1 that I think it was worth having a few slides to summarize today. Some of those key points so that they're really drilled in before we continue with the rest of his book, or at least, the next part of his book. So we have a opening couple of summary slides. Could we deal with those maybe and make a few comments?
Okay, and this summary by Michael is in reference to David Quinn's book, Woman, an Exposition for the Advanced Mind. Worshipping the idol woman entailed exuding mystique and wearing the captivating mask of femininity. This act gave women everything they value and prize. However, modern women seem to no longer don attractive feminine traits. 2 main reasons were cited to explain this. It may be because women have finally attained their atavistic goal and no longer need to engage in any trickery or masquerade. Or it may be that their internalized idol has become defunct, in which case the devotee is left naked and cold and without compass. The mask falls away, and their true, wholly destructive disposition is unveiled before the world.
Yes, now see, this is key. It did come up last time. And I think it's very, very important that we decide. It's not exactly as David Quinn himself, iterated it, but it's something you can infer very strongly from his work. And I just put it into these 2 simple categories, the 2 explanations, to do justice to what he's saying, and also to modernize it up to our times, because he wrote in the early 90s. It does appear that women are not actually donning this mask anymore. Not all of them anyway. Some are still committed to it, and that's fine, but others are not. So is this because something's happened? And you can divide it into 2. And there's no declarative at this point. You can't know or say which it is. First of all, you need a lot of psychological knowledge to make the conclusion, because the second part is that has to do with the internal atavistic idol and whether it's become defunct or not. How could you possibly pass judgment on that if you didn't know all about the works of, say, Carl Jung and Erich Neumann and Edward Edinger and people like that? All the Jungians, in other words, right? Even the Jungians don't even go here. The ones that are happening today. Most of them are in total praise of the goddess tradition. They adopted that particular angle that came out of books like The Great Goddess, The Great Mother, and all of this, and they ran with that and never questioned it, never looked at what we're doing, which is the dark side. So already there's a problem. But even when it comes to the first statement, the first possible reason, is it because they've won? That's still going to take some consideration, right? You need empirical evidence for both. So if they've won, and let's say, like any criminal, say, we've ridden up the harbor, we're docked, we've got you, our cutlasses are at your throat. We not only smell the blood, we've got it. We've got you under our, stiletto heel. We are the winners in the great fight. So we can now remove this mask and have the last giggle. You people, we have operated in the dark for centuries with this, been possessed almost. It is a case of sort of possession. No individual woman stands accused of any of this, really. Not even the ones who are, very necrophilous women, because they're motivated by a force they don't understand. That's why we're doing the David Quinns and the Otto Weiningers. We're trying to look at what the woman is incapable of looking. There's a place, like in the movie Dune, or in the book Dune, there's a place where women cannot go. Right? Frank Herbert made this very clear. There is a place where the woman cannot look. There's a veil. Now, in a way, there's a hidden truth in that. There's a hidden secret. Because if the woman can't, well, the man can. The man who's in the right disposition, the prince, so to speak, he can look where they cannot go. Even the most powerful sorceresses cannot, pierce behind a certain veil. Well, that's into their own origins, because it's murky and it's dark, and they just do not possess the objectivity, shall we say?
Mm.
But the other species can, if it wants to. If it wants to follow the idol, as women follow the idol, then this won't happen. But the perspicacity is there. But in our day and age, it all boils down to empirical truth. If you're trying to take other men who are qualified, who are intelligent, if they're thinking beings, like we talked last time about the 4 or 5 imagos, you have to prove all of this stuff. And that's what the great psychologists I study have done. There is the empirical tie-in. And therefore, it would be wanting of somebody like me if you didn't, have that in your back pocket, if you could pull that out at any time. And then also show where the possible limit is. That's what we're doing right now. Of these two choices, there's a limit. There's an I don't know. There's a question mark still hanging over. Which one is it? Do you need more intelligence than we've got to work it out? Or is it a matter of subjective opinion? Will the enemy, so to speak, supply more evidence so that we then finally can, decide which one it is? But the thing to notice right now is that they're very radically different, aren't they? One is complete success, and the other intones complete failure. If women have mastered the world, so they can remove the mask and have the last giggle and say, hey, I can, be as ugly now, as destructive, as fat, as mean, right, and gross as I want, and you can do nothing about it because we own the shit. Well, then this is where, there's going to be a need for counter strategy. Once you take upon that is your answer, and there's men listening to us, women listeners, and this is the one I like the best. Yeah, I can really tell by just this savage disposition. But then there's the other one that says, no, maybe there's something more subtle. And there's people out there who maybe are a little bit more familiar with psychology, and they say, no, this one sounds more right. I think there's something happened on a deep atavistic level. That maybe this idol, like all idols, right, was born out of blood, was born out of lies and hypocrisy in ancient times, and it's certainly not an eternal thing. At one point, it's going to tarnish, maybe go defunct. And if it does, what will happen to all its devotees when those chains loosen and the possession ends? One would say optimistically, well, then women will suddenly wake up. There'll be this magic wand waved, and women will spark up and wake up and come back to true equality and true realization. Yeah, nice one. That's the Ladybug Disney version. The other version is, oh no, it'll be chaos in the streets. It'll be what we see. You don't have your central idol anymore. It has abandoned you. And just like some hideous Nosferatu zombie apocalypse movie, people are just wandering aimlessly in the streets. clubbing each other to death, tearing at each other's eyes, right? Tearing at statues, tearing at artwork, trying to open the border so that all the orcs can just pour in, right? All of this destructive behavior. Is it that? Is it that? Now, I'm not saying one way or the other. I form my own idea about what it is. It can't be both, though. You can't have victory on one side and then, complete collapse and defeat on the other. So it's one of these. And we've got so far in our world's history today where I think this is, where we're at. And then once you take on board either of these two, then okay, then the whole thing begins. But all right, we go down with the Andrew Tate version, like that, or do we go down this MGTOW version or some other version that hasn't come up yet? Right, then the whole carnival starts. And all the people throw their stuff on the table to say this is what I think is the result, but it'll be polarized. The psychologically empowered person isn't going to go with any of that, are they? Because they're going to say, this thing is out of our hands. This is working on an archetypal level. So let's go on, please.
Women have enslaved themselves to an idolatrous image called woman. If a man should also prostrate himself before this perilous idol, women will be very happy. However, if this idol should tarnish, crumble, or collapse, what kind of behavior should we expect? Does this explain the bizarrely destructive antics of today's female thugocracy?
Well, there you are. That's it in a nutshell. This is summary slide. Again, harping on that fact that what we looked at last program, sorry. Mm-hmm. We've got to look at this. Up to now, women have said, I'm enslaved by the idol. It dominates all and everything in my life. If man, you come along and you have become fascinated, hey, all the better. We're not going to resist that. I mean, of all the worlds that can happen, that's a good one. Did you join us in the worship and the veneration of the idol?
Yeah.
Hell, there's no alternative to that. That's what we want. Yeah, okay. And something, if you look back at the history of the world, and as I said, of great artwork, it sure as hell looks like that. We've had the age of romanticism, we've had the troubadours, and all the other things we've covered in the previous. We've had ages of chivalry. I mean, in the whole 9 yards. In the 20th century has not really been that much better, because if it was, then we wouldn't have had the rise of 4 waves of feminism, would we? So let's carry on.
As we have seen down through history, most women have been motivated by 2 main objectives, one subconscious and the other conscious. On the one hand, they wish to reestablish complete supremacy over the world, subjugate all men to their necrophilous will. On the other hand, they wish to fill their pockets and lives with the endless trinkets and shiny objects of the material world. This insatiable gluttony is in evidence all around us. As part of this immersion in the material world and infatuation with mundane and profane matters, most women care nothing for the subject of female psychology. The workings of their psyche and their hidden motivations are of no interest whatsoever. From a Jungian perspective, this is sure to lead to disaster. One cannot adore and venerate one archetype to the exclusion of all others without suffering complete psychic implosion. Moreover, if the first motivation, the quest for supremacy, is understood unconsciously to be a failure, much of what we see in the women's world today stands explained.
Right. Well, that is what we were just talking about. Why run around like mad ants in the hive trying to fix the problem when the whole thing, centers on something very, very deep and very, very archetypal? We have spoken earlier, much earlier in this series, and we had to, about the nature of the anima being that part of us which throws up images. It's the image creator. This is an essential piece of information. And so any image that comes to haunt the human race, be it the symbols of fascism, that happened during the Hitler period, or the communism, or even something in popular culture, for instance, right? And there have been some emblem, some image. It happens all around us all the time. The advertising agents know all about it, and that's the center of their world as well. But any flag, any emblem, and what it symbolizes, it falls under this category. It's all under the control of the anima. And this is the so-called feminine aspect. So taking that theory, like we have done, we say that the images of the perilous idol has been set up in ancient times by the anima itself. That's its origin. You'll never hear that being said by anybody else. This should have been something that was absolutely axiomatic, to the Jungian school. But as I said, they bought another ticket. They're off on some other, pleasure jaunt. So we can't rely on them. A good Jungian will confirm this, of course, but we're not holding our breath for that. They've been made woke like so many other schools of philosophy and psychology. But the point being that this does not mean, though, that the anima is not in her trickster mode. It's another phase of the Jungian story that has been omitted. All the archetypes, the wild man, right, the magician, the lover, whatever you've got, the hero, the animus, the wizard, whatever way you break it down, each of these archetypes, masculine and feminine, are the polarities that we know, right, that speak for these archetypes. Behind the typologies of masculine and feminine lie these entities or forms. They are, as Jung called it, the DNA of the psyche. But the thing is that they have a trickster mode, a daemonic side. The angelic and the daemonic work hand in hand like two sides of a coin. And often what triggers the daemonic aspect is when you try to venerate or worship one of them in isolation. And this will then mean non-integration. And what women have done is exactly this. In their craving to restore the power that they identify with, they have polarized themselves from their own masculine animus and set up within them. It's a bigger story, but this is to narrow it down, right? They have then created this polarization within themselves, and they've ensured that the force that they do worship, right, the archetype that they are thinking is the center of their world, has become the center of their consciousness, is operating in a positive way, breaking this Jungian rule. So it's a magical ritual that went wrong. Instead of integration, they've got the opposite of that. And so the anima is there for them, yes, but it comes in a daemonic guise, not an angelic one. Because the whole idea of a self, all capitalized self, is psychic wholeness.
Exactly.
And that's a completely different ritual than what we see in history, that we see happening with the genders. But women are the greatest malefactors here, for the reasons that we had to sketch out in all of the different, series. It's elaborate, but there's a lot of historical proof of this, and the empirical proof is this whole gynocracy, this whole matriarchy nonsense, all the things that we've, delineated. That's the proof. That's what you're looking at. But people look at it all the day and just think it's a matter of history and anthropology. We've showed that it's not. But many of the people who write about this have not talked about it in the way I do. They do not then go to the next stage to frame it, in this larger way that I think explains our world today. Men have not made the same psychic violations. So the anima that throws up the image has thrown this image up precisely to Pied Piper the females over the edge of the cliff, eventually. It's the price you pay for psychic imbalance, creating internal, murder out of a necrophilous understanding. Because we have the external crimes that people do, but then we've got these internal crimes that we do against our own psyche. And these are not really catalogued. But when you see the great movements of history, when you see the spread of socialism, communism, fascism, Islam, or whatever you've got, this is where you need to look. And the ones who don't look at this, even when it comes to something like Christianity, for instance, The changing image of the figure of Jesus, the Mariolatry that was never part of the original version, but now is widespread throughout the entire world. People worship Mother Mary far more than they do Jesus, including the papacy. Where did that come in? What happened? Somebody blinked and then suddenly this thing changed over? Yeah, this is because you haven't looked at the archetypal roots. You don't know what a hero is. You don't know what these imagos are. That's why it has to be teased out, but that has to be done in a particular way that I've chosen to do, over many, many, many podcasts and writings over a longer period of time to really tease it out because it's quite dense. But again, back to the point, if that image tarnishes in some way, we'll see a breakdown. And what the rest of the world then does about it, you see, becomes very important. But the basic idea is that the anima is in her trickster mode, in her daemonic mode when it comes to most women. Not all, but most. The women out there who've not followed this trend, and who've looked for psychic wholeness, they're immune to this. The anima is not going to throw up any kind of images that are ultimately perverse and diaphanous and false. But when the perilous idol has been created, that is for women the transcendent quality. And it's captivating. But then should it be deflated, like a big balloon animal, and suddenly it fizzles out, we've got to then ask the question, what will become of that person who's now lost in the wilderness? What are they likely to do? Snap into sanity and go, oh, well, dust myself off, back to the normal then? Is that likely? Or will there be a vacuum left, right? Will they be standing perilously on the edge of an abyss of annihilation, unable to come back, unable to flex any kind of willpower? And if you have no individual, libido left, no will because it's been drained from you, you can't even move to save your own soul, then the only stability is the herd of other lost souls like yourself. It is, in fact, the zombie apocalypse. But let's move on.
The adoration which a mother experiences from a wholly dependent child gives her a profound sense of superiority, and also awakens atavistic memories of a time when nearly all women were worshipped as goddesses. Women find it unbearable to lose this exalted status when they perceive their children growing to become equals. Equality is the last thing most women want.
Yes, here's another one, a real bombshell. It was very key to what we said in the previous show. And it is empirical. It's more of that empirical data. It's empirical to a high degree because the individual listening to us can have actually experienced it. That very wide-eyed adoration that all children, or the vast majority of children, have. And by the way, I don't want to get into it, but there's even a Reichian aspect to this. There's even a biophysical, men who have those very wide eyes and a certain disposition. All sorts of, there's a physiognomy that even remains with this because the imprint of this idol worship of the mother, still can remain in the face of a man. By the way, later on, if you know what you're looking at, which most people don't, so that's a moot point. But the general point we're making is more important, and that is that the empirical aspect, because you have to shuttle back like we've been doing from the ontogenetic to the phylogenetic, from the historical to the individual and back and forth. Otherwise, none of this makes any sense. So when we then look at the phylogenetic, we realize that woman has already had this idealization that man has not had. The father comes into the life of a child much, much later. And therefore the adoration is more conscious, and it's later on, and it may not even reach anything like the strength. Nature has ordained it this way, for goodness sake. Right? Even a pretty shabby mother is going to be a goddess in the eyes of her child. That matters enormously. And it matters that as the child grows and is doing no wrong, the mother's timing, right? The female chronology is another subject we've never even talked about. I don't think I've even covered it on Enslaved in any detail. It's this whole idea of the female chronology that man is absolutely ignorant of. And here's just one little keyhole insight into it. The chronology that women have when they know they're losing their child, that light in the eyes, that craving, that reaching out, right, that intentionality is slowly going to shift to the world. It has to, if there's going to be sanity, and the child is going to leave this autistic, magical child thinking level. And then there's a whole separate story about whether we actually do leave it. See, the scientist, in order to prove that he's not in animism, he's not in magical child thinking, right, goes after those credentials, goes after that white coat and that position in the penthouse. You think that's fooling anyone? The whole of science is a form of magical child thinking, and the scientist is never going to work that out. He's not broken the spell any more than the religious types. It's all magical child thinking, only sublimated. You can't find a place where it's not, for the most part. But that's a separate, inquiry, separate observation. This is the attempt, as you grow, to try and escape it and build these Apollonian platforms where you think that you've found a haven from the Stygian abyss. And in that Stygian abyss, this adoration takes place. And whether or not you can escape it completely is highly unlikely because of our society being anti-psychological and very, very ultra-feminized. So the chance that you can truly break the chains in any kind of logical way that Blake and Weininger wanted is probably not going to happen. And even Freud. It's probably not going to happen. You'll stay within the thrall of this adoration. All you'll do, perhaps, right, is sublimate it and transform it. From the stereotypical mother, it will become the adoration of a cause, of Jesus, of Mother Mary, right, of the guru, of the warlord, whatever. It'll just transfer. But it hasn't ultimately, fundamentally, changed. You're not truly individualistic yet. And this is what we're looking at here is all the etiology of what we call the collective. Mm-hmm. Any commentary about the collective and as opposed to the individual will fail unless you open this door and go through it. It's rooted in this gender dynamics. It's rooted in the typologies. But this is the empirical proof for somebody who's just struggling with this idea. Look, the woman has already been the object of an incredible adoration, and she doesn't want to let it go. And it's not just like, sigh, oh dear, the light has gone out now. My child has been introduced to the world and the identifications have changed. No, no, no. The whole dynamic awakens the atavistic memory when all women were treated as goddesses in the ancient times. And this can happen with women who've never born a child at all. This happens regardless because of this ultra-feminized world where women are still adored irrationally. But let's go on.
The female is constantly in close involvement with her ideal. It is essentially a static image, and it is merely a matter of growing in conformity with it. The highest expression of the dream lies deep within her and subconsciously motivates all her actions. It involves her being the very embodiment of perfection, innocence, and love, with the entire universe worshiping her as such. It is an ideal she unquestioningly believes to be utterly right. Her deepest desire is for it to be actualized, and thus for her to be able to submit to it entirely. And the preceding was a quote from David Quinn in his book Woman, an Exposition for the Advanced Mind.
Yeah, so we're back to Quinn's book, and he's quite right. The moment that this idol, of course, is up and has been up, the woman is unconsciously brought into alignment with it. And since all women are, well, not all, but the vast majority, then there is this strange psychic predisposition and this secret knowing that occurs between women that men actually don't have. And this becomes then, men to men don't really have. They have the hunter thing going, or they may have some other thing, and that shows in their team sports and what have you. But on another much more subtle and deeper level, the women have this connectivity because they've grouped themselves around the idol, right? The idol is an atavistic thing. It's a race memory. It is this projection. And all of a vast majority are enslaved to it. And so that's one thing that a lot of women have in common. Then when you look into our empirical world, you know, and say, well, whoa, isn't this interesting that it's women who make up the collectives? It's women who have this the cultural aspects and the conformity and all the rest of it. And it's women who are obsessed with the fashions and the cosmetics. Do you know how many billions upon billions of dollars would just be saved on this planet if that was all dropped?
Mm-hmm.
Let alone all the fashion magazines and all the other things that go with it, right? But people don't even question these things. But let's go on.
In the mind of every person, and consequently reinforced in social myth, is the belief that woman is closer to perfection than man. This is no mere accident, for such a belief forms the very base upon which our society is built. The more woman is regarded as the embodiment of perfection, the more a man will appear lost, despicable, and worthless.
Yeah, and a lot can be said about this. It's pretty self-evident, but there's actually more ramifications than we can even realize. Because again, if you're following some sort of idol or false image of perfection, what does that imply? That you're not following the correct archetype of it. So you're lost. You're lost in space, right? Because the false thing is standing in the way of that which is real. And this will have consequences over the historical time, leading to the state that we find ourselves in, individually and even collectively. If you followed the ersatz version, if you followed something that is ultimately insubstantial, and Shakespeare warned you against it, it's not like we have had millions, not that we've had brilliant minds not warning us against it, we have. But they're put down as romantics or poets or something or else, pessimists and what have you. It just hasn't sunk in because up until now, this idol has been extremely captivating and powerful. But when a false idol is set up, unfortunately, what it does is it casts into shadow the real thing, mm-hmm. which finally gets lost and buried. Yeah, and you couldn't find it even if you were looking for it, because your entire consciousness is saturated with the falsity after so long a worship of it. It's just impossible to break away. And that's why I say it's not going to be, if the idol becomes tarnished and defunct, women aren't just going to snap out of it so easily and come back to this sort of glowing sanity. That's not the way it works. So the different waves of feminism, the different levels of madness that you're seeing on TikTok and in the world in general with women and their more and more and more and more irrational behavior towards men, this is the increasing, it's the barometer of an increasing meltdown. Because that's what we're doing. We're looking for evidence. Is it because of their success and the realization that triumph, is graspable and is right in their reach and they're reaching out for it? And there's this, incredible feeling of victory and triumph, and that's why they're throwing off the mask? Or can we look at, we're looking at both sides of it here. But is it also because that idol has crumbled in their hands just as they reach out for it? It turns into mush. And the horror of it, that for centuries within them, atavistically, all womankind has been deceived by their own feminine mascot. Think of it. You couldn't think there's no, on this planet in history, there's no greater paradox. This is it. This is the one. The great treasure hunt. Yeah. This has built the wheels, it's built the cart, it's built the horse, the whole thing, the whole shebang has been based on following this idol. And then we should find out psychically it was stitched up at the back. Think of the psychic meltdown of what will happen. Instead of gold coins, it's washers. You open the sacks of gold, you pour it out, and it's all a bunch of washers.
Mm. Yeah.
Holy shit. All the effort, all the work, all the murder, all the lying, all the planning, all the convincing. In other words, the entire, the woman's world entirely. It's like the last image of the fucking Lord of the Rings when Mordor goes into the pit without anybody lifting a hand. Like the ring goes into the flames, it's all over. And without lifting a fucking sword against Mordor, the whole thing evaporates in front of your eyes. Think of what this means in the psyche of the female. That's what I'm addressing. That's what I feel needs to be looked at. The anima is the mistress of all imagery. You know, we have my article, Dark Mother Divine, that again goes through this. And I think I've done a podcast on Enslaved. I'm pretty sure we've done that. And there's also other podcasts listed on dragonmother.org, you know, not all, but a few of the good ones. But in our series, I think we've covered it all. All the key points. You have been Pied Pipered. You see? Because this is the price you pay. Either in an individual life, everything we're talking about can be compressed into an individual life. That's what a Jungian therapist was really meant to be. To look at how you're fucking yourself up in your own ontogenetic life, you know, when you are not in, have a harmonious relationship, a proper relationship with your own psyche. Or when you may be self-murdered or self-loathing, all of the things we know. But what has not, despite the work of Erich Newman and other people, we've lost sight of the idea that this can happen over the whole life of a race. This constitutes a yuga cycle, or whatever way you want to put it, right? It has a much larger application. Millions upon millions of people can be swept up. And it all boils down to the images that are thrown up in the sky. You know, thrown up in front of the psyche, the hermaphrodite, the androgyne. It goes on and on. And then it's all about your enslavement to that image. Christians, Muslims, whatever you've got, Jews, right? Whoever. Idolatry, an age of idolatry. That's what Owen Barfield called it. So it can happen in the individual's life. We know it, we just said it does in relationship to a mother. She's one of the primal idols for a child. But it can also happen over the whole lifetime of a race. Let's go on.
What this means is that fear in men increases as the women around him succeed in achieving a semblance of the great idol. He fears that he and his kind will be left behind. The rational part of him, the masculine part of him, has no interest in being subjugated.
Right. So he's saying here that the masculine is not really inclined to follow certain idols with this level of obedience. It does do it. It can do it, but it's not the total inclination of the masculine principle. The masculine principle is to say, here's my idol, but when nobody's looking, I'm going to go and tap on it, see what it's made of. I'm going to walk around it when nobody's looking, see, is this worth it? I really want to see if this thing is robust. I'm going to double check. But woman hasn't done that. Because remember, we said the transcendent for them is not the transcendent. It's the idol. So you don't question it. It's off limits. In the previous program where the woman is not interested in the transcendent, no, she is. But she's replaced the transcendent with this idol. Or because the anima has, playing with the psyche, that's what's happened. And it's not checked for value. It's not given a check of authenticity. The masculine principle is for that, but they've already working against the masculine principle. They're following false idols. So what the woman has done is she replaced the real transcendent, which is why there are no female philosophers to speak of, right? And all the things that we've spoken about before. They don't need it. That's not what they're interested in. There's just this monotheism, this one, tunnel vision, laser focused on this, achieving the gynocracy. And then there's the lay-by, when you pull over, take a breath, and go, is there a party around here? I need to have fun while this is all taking place. This is going to take a long time. So what do I do in the meantime? Where's the scenic route? Those are the only two. One is conscious and the other is unconscious. And these are the sole preoccupations. So somebody would stand back as a normal critic or cynic of the world and say, how come it is this way? Why are women so preoccupied by all the fashion and the cosmetics and the nonsense, right? Why? But the only answer they'll ever come up with, you see, is really rather superficial. Why that big hatred towards the male? Again, the answers will be fairly superficial. And the answers really are superficial. All this nonsense about a patriarchy and some sort of oppression from men. What nonsense?
Yeah.
Sure, that can be shot down by any intelligent person. Women have got everything they have from the tribal levels onwards because of man's efforts. And since they glut themselves constantly with all the material goodies that the material world can provide, that seems to go against the grain. Right? They're fattening themselves and gluttoning themselves on the very accoutrements of the material world, yet they call themselves anti-materialists, anti-capitalists.
Hmm.
So already, there's a screw loose somewhere. But earlier when we talked about that the man might be also a follower of the idol, well, see, he is. So in this one, I made the note about the chivalric male. Unfortunately, one of the problems is that the ones who follow the idol of the idol, or follow the woman in her pursuit of the idol, is the chivalric male. And the more and more feminized our cultures become, well, obviously this feminization is going to affect certain kinds of men, the simps, right? The Gen Zs, whatever you want to call them, because they're in tow behind. These are the ones who've never really lost that adoration of their own mothers.
Yeah.
Probably one part of it. Is one way of looking at it. But it can also go deeper than that. Because I think that from the dawn of time, there's been this problem. And David Quinn talks about it, and he just did, but the mystique. Women exude, and man finds it worthy. So that also entered into the picture. But let's go on.
3 factors, sexuality, innocence, and otherworldliness, comprise the arsenal which the female unhesitatingly utilizes in her attempts to bring man under her control. Her body is her hidden treasure, a gift reserved for the most select. Her otherworldliness bathes her in a sea of mysteries eternally elusive to us mere mortals. Combine the 3, and you have the powerful illusion of completeness.
Yeah, see, at the bottom of it all, because the image is not thrown up just by any sort of fantasy level, it's actually thrown up by the anima herself. This is where it becomes very, very difficult to break the spell, because the anima is the goddess, the Dark Mother Divine. Just because she's in a trickster form, and just because she, is doing all of this in the daemonic form, with its ultimate goal of psychic wholeness, something we can't even fathom, she's still the anima. But she's been worshipped in this inverted form. She's not being worshipped. It's the images of herself that she's thrown up in the mind of the psyche of the woman, right? This is where it's gone wrong, but this is by design. Because there's the greater demand is that you worship the real thing, but you can't worship the real thing unless there's integration. And since the woman is hidebound against the masculine and against the male, there's no question of integration. That broke down. And so the moment you reach out for the anima, you're only going to get the witch. See, no matter what you do, it has to be an internal personal change for this dynamic to change. The woman has to step outside this whole maelstrom, this whole atavistic timeline. And the lucky thing is, since we're free beings, we can do it. Once you love freedom above all things, then this is possible. right? Both sexes can do it. Now, how they do it, I can't say. Will chivalric men ever stop being chivalric? How the hell do I know? MGTOW looks like maybe a positive start. We don't even know that yet. We'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say, yes, it is. It's a positive start. Something at least is being done, right? Something at least looks like it's on the horizon. And it can be good. Sometimes you have to go cold turkey. Sometimes when you want to see a thing, you stand back from it. You shut the doors, you go into a silence and you look at it from afar. Well, MGTOW on its best day is exactly that. Shut yourselves out from the chaos of the female world so you can come back to find out who the hell you are with a bit of sanity. Yeah. Stop just serving these gluttons hand and foot, and try to slowly, chasten yourself from the whole game. Maybe that'll lead some people to psychosis, meltdown like your Andrew Tate's, or even and some even think he's worse than that. But that's unfortunately the risk we have to take. Or it might bring, great insight and enlightenment. That's why I'm doing my work, because I know which side I'm on. I'm against the man going fucking crazy, or strengthening the negative sides of the patriarchy. So, you come out with this message so that you reach sane men and sane women. So you say, okay, there's ways to change this, but they're on more healthy lines. Bring us those masters from the past that show you how to do it. It's all been, you ain't going to invent nothing new. That's been my message from day one. It's all been done by all the great scholars of the past. We'll link up to ottoweininger.org, my site, dragon mother.org. It's all there. I've got 2 books on it and loads of podcasts on Dragon Mother, on Enslaved, and we've done our series. I mean, this David Quinn's done his bit. And yeah, in the positive way, MGTOW looks like, hey, that could be a very important stage along the way. It's not the ultimate goal, right? But it's an important stage, because when you're haunted and you are mesmerized and tantalized by a kind of psychic image, you just don't pull the switch on that in 5 minutes. There's quite a process, where that image fades, and slowly the delusion of the perilous idol fades. And then even then, after that, there's a sort of a gray area, because you got to be very, very careful, before you even make the next step, so that yet another idol doesn't get placed there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which often happens in society. But let's go on.
The plethora of contradictions which surrounds the female emanates from the complex interplay between these 3 factors. Being in full control of this interplay is the woman's art. This is femininity.
That's right. So he's harping on the same idea. The female has replaced the transcendent, right, with the idol. And everything has to conform to that, this idol of femininity. And when we look then at the history of the world, this is what we're seeing, the unfolding and the various trajectories, and the highways and byways of this process. From its early start onwards. And whether then the question arises, have women been able to see what they're doing and get back to a state of integration? Obviously not. History shows you, no, they've just been committed 100%. All of them are in the thrall of this force. And that leads you to believe then that, see, what's happening now, in some maybe crude way, there's a chance, for some women to wake up. That's ultimately the goal, right? But, as I've already said, might that not be completely hastened in a demonic and bad way if the image that they've been following itself tarnishes? Where it's not a matter of willful decisions or intellectual insight. They failed at that long ago. They had their opportunity long ago to do that. But they persisted and persisted and persisted, right, with the agenda. And the horrors and the crimes of it have just mounted to such a degree that now the anima is saying, okay, your last chance is over. And I just pull the fucking plug on the image and let's see what happens to you all.
Mm.
You're not it's not under your hands anymore. So reaching for the prize, right? First the animal say, oh, but I'm not going to pull the plug until I'm not going to pull it too early, right? It's perfect timing.
Of course.
You're not just not just going to get a lick out of the window. You're going to really see. You're going to smell the leather. You're going to say, this is it, that we've reached it, the penthouse. Yeah, girls, we've done it. And it's at that moment, like it's the end of the Fight Club movie, right? Now, the whole thing comes down plutonically at that point.
Mm.
But first, you're going to die with a smell of it on your fucking nose, you know? This is what you could have had. This is what you were striving for. But no, a greater power than what you could even imagine, you see, was behind it. You worshipped me, but you worshipped me falsely. And you played with something that's extraordinarily, you know, capable and powerful. And you wanted it all for bad reasons. When you wanted my power, you wanted it to lord it over men. And in doing so, from the childhood onwards, from innocence onwards, you violated, you know, the law. And it doesn't matter where this animosity was learned. Was it from your own mothers, a terrible mother, from the peer group, from some magazines, or what? That's irrelevant. Innocence of the law is no excuse. Well, it's certainly no excuse in these terms either. You know, ignorance of the law. This is the psychic law. This is the law of the very marrow of a person's being. And repeated affronts over and over again through time, through history. And the looting and the rampaging and even the sexual debauchery, you know, it amounts to the sort of rape of the male soul.
Yeah.
The chivalric man just being sort of a measure of that. He's the barometer of that. Is all standing of the proof of it in the court of Lady Justice, right? But she's blindfolded, meaning none of your pleas for mercy, none of your coquettishness, none of your masquerade, poor me, is going to matter. She's totally blinded to that. All there is the rule, the law, the scales of justice and the mighty sword of justice. So womankind has played with a force that's understood what was going on from a very early age, from a very early time, and has set up a particular dynamic. Now, the Jungians, as I repeat again, were the ones who were meant to bring this truth, what I'm talking about, to the world. They didn't do it. So somebody had to step up. Everything I'm saying is textbook Jung, by the way, textbook Jung. Cannot be contradicted by anybody who claims to be a Jungian. Absolutely not. Everything I'm talking about is fact. These archetypes have a very, very peculiar bivalent nature, a chthonic nature, and an Apollonian nature. Solar and a lunar, they're bivalent, like the statue of Janus.
Mm.
They're chameleon-like. But the one thing that decides the complexion of the unconscious, and the collective unconscious, is your own visage. That decides everything. The unconscious only is a specular domain in which it becomes a heaven or hell based in your own desires and intentions, you see, moving into it. That's why, as I always write in my work, personalism is the end of all philosophy. It's the end of existentialism, right? It all leads into personalism. And Jung was, in my eyes, a great personalist. And I'll defend that to the end against any Jungian who thinks otherwise. Let's go on.
It is clear then why women have no principles, or at least principles which last 2 consecutive moments. Consistency and changeability must remain mutually exclusive. The only thing consistent in women is her lack of consistency. She can believe one thing today, its complete opposite tomorrow, and not bat an eyelid. How could she be doing wrong when she had succeeded each time and enjoying herself immensely?
There you go. So that harkens back to what we said before, the 2 agendas. One is the universal need for the gynocracy, and the other is the entertainment factor.
Mm-hmm.
While I'm doing this, adorn me, worship me, adorn me, and keep me entertained. Remember, the real transcendent has been replaced. One by the perilous idol, and the second by the preoccupation with the material world. The infatuations, either the hedonic or the power interest. That's all they have. So this means that in most women's lives, the transcendent, in terms of, the spiritual, is not there. Now, they faked it with the New Age movement and some of the other claptrap, right? There's a lot of different fakery here. That's essential. But when you knock up against it, you find that it's just a very, very thin veneer. It's boast. It's just a pretense. I saw it in America, when I was hanging out with these New Agers. Most of them women, super rich, and just as empty as they come. But they all had their yoga mats. They all had their, meditation rooms and their beads and their incense. I never met more hollow people in my whole fucking life. And then to contrast that, I met the really holy people, right? Indescribable. And they had fucking nothing. They had fuck all. Across the world, you get the same issue over and over again. But when you replaced the transcendent, then all eyes, became the mundane and the profane. This became the dominion. And so the real transcendent became null and void, become unimportant. This is a sad thing. And most men have followed it. That's why the world's in the miserable state that it is. And we lost sight of the real transcendent, which is why it's an effort for people, That's another reason I put up my work, is to try and reorient people back to the great minds of the past who, for all their flaws perhaps, right, were at least still asking these greater questions, and bring them to, the people who listen to me, so that they have. And they all include women. I've done a podcast on Enslaved called Great Women. We're always citing them in my books and works. But this then leaves us in no doubt that it existed. Try to reintroduce the questions. I've even had blowback recently from women saying, Michael, why are you bothering with all the psychology and philosophy? It's meaningless. Drop it.
Really?
Talk about transhumanism and vaccinations instead. I can actually show you emails from women telling me that.
Huh. Guess I shouldn't be surprised.
They're in their movement. They're in our movement. These are not women of the world.
Yeah,
These
no,
are women
yeah.
allegedly are meant to be into these subjects.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Condemning me for even being into philosophy and psychology. Seeing it as completely meaningless. They'd rather talk about transhumanism. What can you do with people like that? So this is a very vital living reality. It rubs people up the wrong way. Now, I've ever had a problem with that. I've never had a problem trying to be liked, because I never was liked. So I got used to it, before I was 10 years old, not being liked. So I never then needed to be trying to be liked. It freed me, you see, from this attempts that mostly captivate other people.
Yeah.
And it sent me on my way. Let's go on.
This slide has some commentary from you, Michael. It says, of the two main female objectives, this one, the hedonic, is there for all men to see. It is not hidden. What has been hidden is the first and most important objective, the re-establishment of a universal gynocracy. It is only in recent times that men are beginning to get a glimpse of this age-old agenda.
Well, that's true, you see. That's true. The second agenda of the hedonism has never been hidden. Anyone can sit down in any mall, go to a little cafe, go to a little bench in the middle of a mall and sit there and just observe what's happening around you. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. And I'm glad to say a lot of men are doing it. And this is part of the study. This is not trivial. This is part of it. Look at the woman's world. What are they talking about? Sit and listen. Sit and observe. Look at how much money is going into their manicures and their facials, right? And all the fucking rest of it. The incredible, exorbitant money, the prices of their clothes and underwear and fashions. Just observe it and think. And slowly introduce yourself, you see, to these veils and the levels of hypocrisy. And then also, when you do shove a mic into some of their faces, just watch the man hate splurge out, right? It's automatic. It's a program running in the back of their mind that as soon as you as soon as you erect a mirror where they have to look at themselves, they have the script already there to account for any of their own bad behavior, or allegedly hope that you'll fall for their account, which is blame man for everything. And up till now, till very recent times, men have sort of taken this on board seriously, which means, of course, they've lost sight of the other. And that's the plan, right? This is the plan. The women want to hypnotize and bamboozle men into believing that their causes actually have some substance, when, to tell you the truth, they've really none at all. But should the game plan, fail, as I think it is, and women are starting to realize, hey, this feminism hasn't really worked for us. It is pretty illusory. It hasn't won all the women of the world to our side. It doesn't have the teeth that we thought it would have. This creates a sort of a panic. And the thing that these slides are pointing out is that unless you do have an anchoring, right, in the real transcendent, you are stark naked as a human being. If the real holy and the real divine is not there on a very, substantial level, inner level, then you are not nourished.
Exactly.
And all you have is the words. You have the empty phrases. You've got the false leaders of the women's movement and what have you, all these CIA operatives and what else, right? You're not left with much. Clueless hedonists, just in the same way that, Christian evangelists, all of them have been suckered. And other organizations throughout the world. But in this case, you see, remember, we've had previous slides before where I've pointed out that it was women's job to introduce. We got this out of the Reverend Dabney and other places.
Mm.
It was women's sovereign duty to introduce their children to the holy, to the divine. That's why they were endowed by nature with these feminine traits. Before they were misused, that is, right? Is there any more slides there?
We have actually quite a few. We're on 15 right now, and we have 22 total.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Just the fact that women are regarded as objects of beauty stifles any potential for philosophical development. They come to learn very early on in life that their prime asset in the world is their desirability as women. To ensure a constant flow of benefits, all that is required of them is to know how to please and manipulate men. And women know this is a skill easily learned. And at the bottom of this slide, there's a note here. It says, men include this bond in their ideas about the transcendent.
Right. Now, see, the manipulation of the male through the female wiles creates this idea in the head of a man that this is part of the transcendent, what it means to be, enraptured. This is sort of the universal romanticization. It's not for the woman. She can feign it if she wants. It's part of those two agendas. I'm walking in rhythm with the man so I can get him under my feet, or he's the provider of the trinkets and the shiny objects that I need for my entertainment value. That's all she sees when she's looking at a man. But the man, he is in a state of enthrallment. So what he's mistakenly done, and this is an area where this needs to change, he's got to shatter that illusion. Right? He's got to stop thinking that this love bond that he is involved in, sexually and romantically, is part of the transcendent. He's including that in his, reverence for the divine. This is, part of the whole chivalric model. And this also awakens in him the reminder of what he had with his mother. The idolatry there, that becomes more amorphous, right? It moves from that place on the stereotypical level, but it becomes more spread out. Sort of more polymorphous. And he can project it on women. We have this stuff about a man's type that he likes and all, all the different highways and byways of this. But what he's doing is different than the woman. The woman's transcendent is a lower transcendent that only involves those two aspects. But for the man who's still connected to the true transcendent, unfortunately, he often sublates his connection with woman into that realm and sets himself up for, horrendous outcomes. He overinflates his romantic bonds up to the, to the supernal. And then should that fail, you see what happens to him, don't you? Mm. Right. He becomes totally jaded and wrecked and suicidal and fatalistic. And it's at this point that he may then become, we've talked about this before, pathological. He may turn against women in a criminal way, but he wouldn't have this wouldn't have happened if he hadn't first inflated the image of the woman. She's not your relationship with a woman is not meant to be inflated to the level of the transcendent. That's one of these unspoken laws. And when you do it, you violate divine law. Everything needs to be in its fucking place. You get your wires crossed. And then, should woman show her real colors or whatever happens and there's a breakdown in the whole thing, you are shattered on a soul level. And you become very, very perverse. This is where man becomes necrophilus. And this is often where, yes. Now, don't you see what you're doing, though? This is exactly what most women want, because then they take a Polaroid of that necrophilus male and hold that up and say, see, look at the patriarchy. We're exonerated from anything we do. Look at these criminals. Look at these maniacs. So actually what you've done is played right into the hands of the female. You think you've turned against her, waving your club. No. All the cameras just go off. Click, 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 click. And they've just added you to the family fucking album. Brilliant. And they'll wheel you out every fucking time. Your own criminality has worked against the male world. You thought you were fighting for it. With his women or bitches line. Be very careful. There's a fucking minefield out there. These Andrew Tates and people like that, or even worse, have no idea of the damage they're doing. They're breeding men in their image. But do you really think for a moment that's going to fix anything? In a few men it might, because they cease to be chivalric. Yes, that's positive. I go for that. But it's not going to help if the man is still idealizing women. And then when he meets a woman, right, and he goes into a relationship with her, and like Quinn is saying, all the projections start up again. And you make the mistake of, equating that with the divine, which many, many men do. And they have their lives wrecked because of it. Then the come down on the other side of that is a seething hatred. And women know all too well how to make good of that. They have done for centuries. The misogyny aspect, And they like to find men who embody that in their own lives or whatever, in history or whatever, and then take a snapshot of that. And that's part of their arsenal to drag that out any time that their offenses are mentioned. We've got to see through this. It's gone.
Kind of makes me think too, when I think about Andrew Tate, I mean, isn't he kind of a pseudo a pseudo-malignant feminine force in a sense. I mean, he seems to be wanting to feed off of his audience, but I don't know. That's just a thought.
Yeah, he's not doing any real good.
Yeah.
However, like I said, in any lie, there has to be elements of the truth.
Yeah, fair.
So telling men to get a backbone, work out a bit, get their lives in order, just like Jordan Peterson said, fix your own room. Look, they've peppered it with certain truths.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm supportive of that. But what they fail to understand is that there's a difference between maleness and masculinity. One is a gender thing, and the other is a typology.
Mhm.
And so when these Tates are never citing the people I do, like Jung and Newman and all these people, they're just keeping it on a stereotypical level. Now, that may help certain people. I'm not saying it doesn't. It might help some fucking wishy-washy noodle out there, right? Who's going to be walked over by these monstrous women that are all around him. He has no clue. Yeah, oh, look, all right. All right. Some jelly fucking plasticine guy who's could be easily dominated by the bitches that do walk around. Yeah, okay, we get it. But that's just going to be tit for tat. For every person like that, the woman can have a malignant male, and vice versa. He's armoring you against malignant women, but the women will say, hey girls, we're armoring you against those malignant men. Mm. How long can that last? That's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. You see?
Yeah.
And then now the fucker's been arrested for all sorts of other fucking crimes against women, right? He's a lunatic. He's a psycho. Him and his brother have been, they're going to be locked up soon. So if you've been following the fool, you look pretty stupid. Yeah. That's not, no, I've never thought of that as being, see, in the end of the day, the enemy that you're fighting is so sophisticated and smart that they'll get your number down, Mr. Tate, and you'll be in the rear view mirror tomorrow. Your enemy is far more chameleon-like, far more studious than you imagine. And you are not going to put a crimp in their action at all with what you've got. You're a one-star creature only. But the adversary that you fight has had thousands of years to mature their strategy. It might be a good springboard, it might be a good beginning, right, on this sort of a freshman level, but very, very quickly, you're going to have to, have something there for the next level up. Yeah. Because this thing is vast. And as we've shown, it is a phylogenetic connection, an atavistic connection, the psychological, and all the things we've talked about. Let's go on.
Woman is one-dimensional. She knows nothing other than the steadily flowing stream of emotions. Anything other than this is inconceivable to her. In her heart of hearts, she finds reason and the dialectical process empty and meaningless.
Again, the transcendent qualities. When reason, even like Ayn Rand has spoken of it, is the thing that introduces you to reality. No, that's all violated. There's no reality outside the urban matrix that's been created for her. Woman is not natural anymore. Even in their birth process, as well as in vitro and whatever's coming next, right? The whole thing is becoming more and more artificial. And the actual holy, the actual divine, plays less and less and less a role. Just in the same way as traditional values are playing less and less and less of a role. But as those things melt down, what do you have of substance to replace it? And some women are waking up because they realize, fuck, there's nothing here. Exactly. Some women are actually starting to find this out, which is a good sign. But let's go on.
It is easy to see, then, why the concept of truth has little meaning for her. She can only judge an idea in terms of how much happiness it gives her. Her subconscious mind processes such factors as how many other people hold the same view. In short, her concern is what effect the idea will have on her place in the herd. The only way she will adopt a position in life is when she is absolutely certain that there are significant others who hold the same position. And the note at the bottom of this slide says, the herd being other women.
Exactly. It's the thugocracy. So the more and more spiritually threadbare you become, the more and more that the image starts to collapse, right? The perilous idol, the more and more naked and empty you become. And the world that you built up full of its material, accoutrements, even that starts to fade. And now it's a place just full of cobwebs, spiders, and rats, right? And you can't believe it. And so you need to glut yourself more and more, and you become just more and more avaricious because you're more and more empty. You're more and more vapid. And the other factor is you become more hysterical. You need the comfort of the other zombies like yourself who are equally as empty. But you feel that if you can get together, right, with others who can, and keep giving each other the cues and affectations, this will then, sustain you for a while. But as I've said for many, many years now, the crowd is itself its own worst enemy. The crowd is itself its own testament of failure. Right? Because a million fools squared is still zero. A million zeros, right? Is still zero. The need that you need to cluster with these other people to get these affirmations is a sign that there's no substance underneath. This is the difference between the collective and the individual. The individual is robust within himself because he's gone through processes that the collective person can simply not understand. And he's more natural, right? He has something deeper than these other people understand. He's got nature on his side because nature has ordained it that the child evolve, from the archaic up into the Apollonian. Man does not do that of his own will. How could he? He's only 3 years old. Right? There is a natural teleological force. And so the person who commits to the individual process is with nature, is doing nature's bidding. Where the person who stands still or regresses is anti-natural. And the person who takes another, highway, who tries to, go into another direction is also doing the same. They're flaunting nature. So it goes back to what we were saying about the anima moving into her trickster mode. It's basically saying the same thing. But the individual is a creature of nature, and he'll be guided by natural forces where the collectivistic person doesn't even know what that is and wouldn't even like it, by the way. Even if nature was to intrude, they would not like that. And it's why they're into the total institution, right? It's why they want to live in the urban gulag with everything just a push button away. See, the collectivist is a non-person. The crowd has become, it's not about you belonging to the crowd. It's the crowd in your head. There's something that happens that most of the people who comment on this simply do not grasp. Through the feature of the superego, right, it gets imported within the head, and then this is all done to lower a form of existential anxiety. But what's never taught to you, because we don't want to know anything about existentialism or psychology, is that yes, you do indeed, by importing the crowd into your head, you do lower one form of anxiety, the anxiety of guilt. And the guilt is the guilt of I'm not accepted by other losers. This compulsive need to be liked and all the rest of it. Yeah, you are being liked now, or at least you think you are. And so there's this, I'm making the grade. The superego will stop flooding you with guilt. And that can make you feel very high for a while. But it's the great existential psychologists, and they exclusively said, this is not the end of the game. This is where other psychologies stop. But we'll absolutely guarantee you that this is not the end of your road. Because there'll now be a creeping other form of anxiety that will rise up to nullify the whole process that the superego has got you to sign on for. And that's called the conscience. Mm-hmm. And it comes and floods you with fucking shame for doing what? Conforming. So the collective, right, is a sort of a dragon eating its own tail. It's completely unsustainable. It promised you, right, lowering anxiety, and it actually does deliver on that, but only for a while. Because there's a deeper moral center within all human beings that will penalize you just as bad. It can saturate you with shame that in the end is even more toxic, more destabilizing than the fucking guilt. It can poison you completely. And you don't know where it's coming from. And you can't turn to any psychologist because they don't know anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
They'll still think it's the guilt thing or whatever and misdiagnose you and hand you some fucking pill.
Exactly.
And that'll just, chemical lobotomy. Brilliant. Now, this affects what we're talking about. Do women are they dominated more by the superego, right? And the guilt complex? Or are they motivated and animated by the conscience and the shame complex? I think we can know what it is. But the psychologists have dropped the ball. They're all woke. So they go into this. But this was at the heart of existential psychology, Now psychologists don't treat the latter. They give you the car wash. They give you the spring clean to send you back out to be adjusted to the abnormal fucking world. And lowering guilt and conforming to some stupid fucking herd mentality is all they care about. Authenticity is a bad word. They don't want to know anything about it. Or the outsider, right? Walking this through Siddhartha Road. This is not something they're there to encourage you to do. The whole thing has become completely warped. In fact, it's more likely that those kinds of aspirations are going to be pathologized. You'll turn up in the DSM as some neurotic if you want to do those things. And it's not much better in the New Age movement. That's just, again, another, facade of individuality. What it is a sort of franchise. It's, carbon copies of some Eastern trap all put together by clever people like Eckhart Tolle and what have you, right? And before that, you had others doing it, piecing it together, trying to make it a little bit applicable to the Western mind. But all that is doing is just removing surface dust. Because the more and more you commit to the inauthentic world, the more and more you'll have these continual breakdowns. So what we know as psychology today is nothing more than a tune-up to people who are fundamentally broken, right? But keep going in for this tune-up and then right back out into the streets. They won't tolerate anything different. They don't want the real thing at all. And that's why they don't have it. Big Pharma grew up and said, we'll just meet your need. We know you don't want the real thing. We're not going to train anybody that we have to do the real thing. So you don't need to worry about that. Heidegger was a fascist, don't you know? He was a proto-Nazi. So don't worry about that. These other guys were all kooks and pessimists and fatalists. Don't worry about any of them. And it worked. Because the underlying nature of the human being, you see, is to avoid all the things that we're talking about. The lowering of guilt, temporarily, an adjustment to the fucking crowd. And as Gustave Le Bon said, the very crowd itself is feminine.
Mm-hmm.
You see, I said, it's all been said. It's all been done. But did anybody read it? Did anybody get it? It in itself throws up an idol. All the history has just been that. The crowd throwing up a new idol of one kind or another. So everything that I'm talking about is empirical. But while you do this, the real transcendent, as taught by the great masters, that gets thrown to the side. Until in the end, you can't even tell the difference. You don't even know what you're talking about. The two have become so fused together. Let's go on.
Women do not want to be individuals. They want to be women. In fact, the role of woman has evolved precisely to minimize any genuine individuality. Conflict, as something fundamentally different from the norm, an intense and sustained suffering, a conquering and striving for lofty and personal ideals. These are the qualities of an individual, qualities which woman regards as aberrations of character. She hates the individual who necessarily undermines her world. She strives to make everyone like herself, open-minded, happy, tolerant, caring, sensitive to others, cooperative. That is a non-entity.
Yeah, it's also tribal. It's basically a tribal entity. They came out of the tribal. They never moved from the tribal. They've got the tribal in their blood right now. But see, the man on the Siddhartha road, that being who is striving to be the individual, as Ayn Rand so fantastically, portrayed, is engaged in a perpetual struggle. He has an anxiety of his own, which is to avoid the crowd. His anxiety doesn't come from being not liked. His anxiety comes from, how can I avoid these fuckers? Because they're active. Right? They wish to drag me in at all accounts to their level. And on weaker days, I might be tempted to do that. So he has that anxiety, but also don't forget, he is a sage. He looks with an eye of the outsider, which is a holy eye. He is observing them with compassion. He has anxiety for them, the way they're living. The horrendous state of consciousness that he sees them being in only awakens a kind of a sadness. So he is inheriting more struggle than these people will ever know. That's what they also hate. When a person like that comes in the midst of these people, they automatically resist and hate it because he's gone where they can't go. He has that silent power. It's not what Andrew Tate is telling you, to pump it till it hurts. No, you fucking arsehole. It's the inner, quiet power. Where this person has seen into the heart of things. You see? And he's able to then surveil the whole of what mankind is doing and understand it as being just thoroughly unwholesome and wrong-headed. So he has anxieties, all right, but they're of an existential kind. And he learns to live with it because he realizes there's no alleviation. The closest he can get to alleviation is being close to the thoughts of the great ones. Surrounding himself in the works of the great ones, right? But that in itself is the only panacea he'll ever know. And he refuses to replace the real transcendent with these shams. He's not going to try and keep himself warm at night, you see, with the shams, like everybody else does. In other terms, when we talked about the amagos, right? The fourth and fifth amagos, women can't stand them. Because included in the knowledge of that type of man we're talking about is the knowledge of woman.
Oh, Michael, can I interject quickly? I know that your Female and the Unconscious series in Unslaved talks about the fourth and fifth types, but just for people who are watching, could you describe them really briefly for them, the fourth and fifth amagos?
Well, yes, the 1, 2, and 3, right? Let's start with 1 and 2. These are your ordinary guys. Mm-hmm. They probably were in idolatry of their mothers. They never really broke it. They're completely enthralled by woman's mysteriousness, her sexuality, right? And women get along so great with those guys, right? Drinking beer by the pool, going watching the game, right? So they never have to question or think about the subtler things that, we're talking about. Women are just good old pals and, get on the back of my motorbike, get into my truck, and we just go about business. I don't even think about it. And so the woman is off the hook with those guys. So the amagos are what you get in the eyes of the woman. The imago doesn't exist except as a perceptual thing. These men can be very good. We're surrounded by them. They're great guys. The thing is that in the eyes of the woman, they're no threat because they have zero psychological knowledge. They can't even get as far as MGTOW. Number 3 is more physically, intellectually, let's say he's more the James Bond type, the player. But his knowledge of women is mostly just, again, within their control. He's no ultimate threat. He's more stylistic. He's more styleful. He rather play tennis than pool. Right? You go out in his yacht rather than his motorbike. Okay, he's an upgrade of 1 and 2. He's more affluent. He's something that if you went around and with women, you know, they describe this type: tall, dark, handsome, foreign, whatever, you know, all that stuff. More suave.
Mm.
But when it comes to his knowledge of woman, he's exactly the same as 1 and 2. But as you move up to 4 and 5, these are definitely more intellectually advanced, sort of your professorial type. And they may even be physically older than the woman that we're talking about. Number 4, maybe an older, you know, politician type or intellectual type or professor type. And they may have more of an intellectual understanding because they've read some Dostoevsky or whatever, right? And they're a little bit aware of the, you know, they read their Schopenhauers, so they know about these gender dynamics a little bit. Well, in proportion to their knowledge of woman will be attracted to them less. It's the same with number 5. Now, this is empirical because what happens, of course, is if the woman, right, devalues the higher imagos, 4 and 5, those men will be eventually bred out of our society because women won't go with them and won't breed with them, won't marry them or entertain them in any way, except very, very superficially. So this means that over time, 1, 2, and 3 are more the men that you find, meaning more ignorant, more in the service of women, more deluded. If you talk to them, right, the best they'll ever get to, the best, and that's even if they've been very badly mistreated, is, yeah, women are tigresses, women are bitches. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. Nothing more. No comments about their mothers, you know, or any other subject matter at all. 4 and 5 are your ones for that. But then 4 and 5 are going to be less and less and less because they're going to be bred out because women will decide we don't want those men. We don't want to entertain them. We don't want to, you know, date them, and we don't want to marry them. And so when you do even come across a man like that, he's single. And he may be so full of frustration, you know, that he's not particularly a good oracle to listen to in the first place because he's contaminated with animosity, you know, to the woman. So there's certain truths he can impart, but ultimately he's been contaminated.
Mm.
Yeah. And number 5, he's a completely indescribable creature because he's the one who has the complete insight into womankind, and therefore his life cannot even be, you know, qualified along with anybody else. But women in general are not going to be attracted to him in any shape or form. It's a totally different dynamic, except maybe temporarily, you know, brushing by temporarily. It is possible that they can have short-term relationships with people, but it'll take a very exceptional woman to ever go near a guy like that. So they're not even really part of the narrative at all, you know.
Mm.
Let's go on.
The inherent ungratefulness of woman is most obvious in her movement. Acknowledge, if you will, that the world we live in is, and always has been, a woman's world. Women have amazingly short memories. They are like children who are so taken in by what is happening at each moment they completely forget what life was like yesterday. They forget that the one thing which stands between them and the untamed forces of nature is man.
Yeah, and this thing about memory is very important as well, because as we said, the true individual is a creature of nature. We give our description of that. And that these other people, these women of the world, they're really not. The more and more you deny nature, the more you move into these urban gulags and just you get your life, you know, involved with this sort of feminine crowd, the less and less your memory works.
Mm.
Because the more divorced you are from nature. Remember, I said the anima has Pied Pipered you right to the edge of a cliff. You've long been disconnected from your biological roots. And memory is one of these things. Any woman who is starkly aware of the history of the world would admire and respect men, not hate or envy them, you know. The track record of what men have done for womankind would be completely in the forefront. But unfortunately, it's even being erased. And even a lot of men, these simps, have totally forgotten about it. They live in a country that's only 200 years old. What do you think was happening 100, 200 years ago here in the Wild West, so to speak, right? It's all been forgotten, let alone, you know, the longer journey. Then there's these people who, you know, affluent types, they go out to these tribal areas, these Eastern worlds, and they're shocked when they see what the hell it is. You don't even have a toilet. You got open sewers. You got cholera and typhoid today. And that's just for starters. Right? Anything that any Western man brought to some of these outlying places in Africa and India hasn't been maintained since the day it was built. They can't even maintenance what the white man put there, let alone build it again for themselves. It's all crumbling. Just go to Mexico and take a look around. Or any of these, equatorial places. It's a shambles. That's why they're all trying to pour into the West. From Honduras or Syria or wherever they're coming from, Afghanistan, right? Of course they are, because their own cultures are in wreck and ruin. There's nothing there. It's completely corrupt. All the leaders are totally corrupt. They can't wait to get into the West. They're driving 18-wheelers without licenses, going up and down one-way streets, killing people, running over them, running over children on their bicycles and driving like maniacs from all parts of the third world. No licenses required, but they fucking need a license from you. They want fucking passports and, passes and all sorts of shit from you. You've been paying taxes for years. Well, it doesn't matter. But you can let all these fucking hordes in. The amount of brutality, the mayhem that they're causing under the name of diversity and what have you. But this disconnect from nature is all part of it. In the end, there won't be any nature. It'll be completely artificial. Now, your Gustav Le Bons have warned about this, right? The other people that I study, even your Ayn Rands, have all warned about this. Let's go on.
If man was to be criticized, it would be for doing too good a job. He has made woman too happy and secure, so that nowadays, with her infinite capacity towards forgetfulness, she has come to hold the value of man in contempt.
Yeah, this is, I think, is true. And more men are starting to see this, how they've been used as worker ants. And women aren't even concealing it. On TikTok and other things, some of the statements they're making clearly show you that this has become even conscious, the contempt that they have. And that remains to be seen what is going to actually be done about it. Because there's all sorts of superficial things that can be done to remedy this. Where men actually just stop engaging in this chivalric action, and we'll have to see then what happens. But as I said, women are chameleons. The moment that they spot that this is the case, they can completely change their image, surface image, and pretend that they're all trad wives again. Overnight. They're very, very clever. And man is so dumb, he'll fall for it. He won't be checking their profiles and going back into their social media history to say, let me see the pink hair and the nose rings. He won't demand it. He'll just believe it. The woman is a chameleon. They're creatures of mystique. They know how to do it. They sense where the wind is blowing. And if it turns out that they feel that their lives, their comforts are being compromised by man's awakening conscience, they can grow their hair out again, put on a frock, start, uttering what they know the man wants to hear, and their man will just fucking swallow it up. He won't ask to see family albums and what were you doing when you were in school? Oh, I fucking see what you were doing, you little commie bitch. Look at the fucking state of you. Oh, I get what's going on. You changed in midstream. Or later on as you age and life gets tougher. So you drop this feminist line and become, pretending that you've always loved men. Well, I can fucking see from your history that's a total lie. But the women can easily delete their profiles. You see? Easily change their avatars. Once they know which way the wind is blowing. And by the way, some of them are already doing it. This is the disingenuous creature that you're dealing with. So what I'm trying to say is that may not be a full answer then. Right? It may not be a full answer. Because you're dealing with a slippery creature who knows how the game is played and that you can do criminal activity up to a certain point, and then when the whistle blows, right, you're going to have to put on your new face. And I personally am very, very worried about that because I know how easily it can be done. Women will always read the signs far faster than any man. They'll be always ahead of you in this game. And since their core nature is duplicity, and because they've practiced it for centuries, they will know when the going gets tough, right, how to respond. Now, some won't and just melt down, and they're just so obnoxious that they can't hide it and don't want to hide it. But there's many actually far more sophisticated women who'll get their cake and eat it too. And I don't know what really can be done about that, except that man has to become a lot more critical, judgmental, and a bit more, savvy himself. So when you're meeting a girl or dating, go back several years. Ask them to give a proper account of their past, just like they'll ask you. Don't take it face value at all. Never make that mistake. Try to go back even to their school days, ask questions, find out, look at photographs. Have you ever been to Portland, Oregon? Let's go on.
The history of evolution of patriarchal institutions was the male response to the oppression he suffered under woman. Now, woman has no intention of giving up her own power, but is requiring man to shed his.
Right. That's more realistic. Is because they've committed to the power struggle for so long, why should they give it up? So for the vast majority of women, what that really means is they're not going to go down without a fight. They'd rather still work to, in some way, incriminate men, working within the legal profession, whatever, and I'm starting to see that there's a retaliation about that. Several states right now have actually removed women's rights in the divorce courts. Yeah. They no longer are giving, the assets, 50% of the assets. This is happening right now in America. It's no longer obligatory in certain states, and it's spreading. So that's a good sign. So I'm not closed to the fact that, and remember, how can I be closed to change when I'm telling you that the anima, in my opinion, is behind the whole thing in the first place? The whole thing, from top to bottom, inside out, is in the hands of a supernal force whose power is unlimited. We can't even get the keyhole version of view into what's really taking place here. This is far beyond anybody's stereotypical life or mind. Right? You're always going to have mothers, and you're always going to have children. So you'll always have this idolatry. That's hard to erase. There's certain things that, probably will never be erased. How could it? How could any child be knowledgeable enough to not look at their mother, in some sort of exalted way? So there's certain things that are here to stay. But it's what's been built on that. Right? The necrophilus aspect is what's happened at the core of the female psyche. But what's also at the core of the female psyche are these archetypes. They're what's really divine. They're part of the transcendent that I'm speaking about. And they have their own rules and their own way of working, which even with the help of Jung and Newman, we only have a very, very minor insight into the exact dynamics. But one thing is absolutely known. Only do they endorse wholesomeness, integration, of which there are many degrees. You don't just have it wave a magic wand and then you're suddenly completely, all the archetypes are at the round table, all perfect. No, it's a long, process ongoing. But women have been in violation of that process for too long, for many centuries, doing the complete opposite, the sorcery. Yep. And we are now living in the end times where this is all going to be worked out. There's a certain end by date. This cannot continue. Blake was absolutely convinced of that. That a time will come where, it'll be, don't want to get into all his language of it, but he was saying that this will be terminal. There will come a time where a major change has to take place. Now, whether it happens in the male world or in the female world or a bit of both, this is all remains to be seen. We're living in some very interesting times. Even astrologically, this is shown to be the case. But when you don't have the true transcendent, you've replaced it. The only way that you can block the real divine, right, is when you put something something's impersonating it, has been put up in between. But to continue that for centuries, it has to be the archetypes themselves that feel that they've been violated by individuals. And that's what accounts for many, many, many of the syndromes in our society. It also accounts for the fact of why most men are not even privy to what we're talking about, and never will be. They avoid it like the plague. You'd be amazed. I've talked about this for years, and you wouldn't believe the deaf ears it falls on. How they run from this and avoid it. And then still convince themselves that they know something about, modern times. The subject of women is completely parked. It doesn't even enter their own minds. These are the Amagos 1 and 2, like I was talking about.
Mm.
They haven't even got to the third stage. But in their heads, right? These are great prophets, great motivational counselors. They know all about it. Chasing the fucking headlines every day. You can't, and if you bring this subject up, the discomfort that they feel. Yeah. So you're stuck there. Let's go on.
Mm. We've got one last slide here. It's a commentary from you, Michael. It says, in order to succeed at the game of womanhood, women have sacrificed their humanity, careless of the severe repercussions for doing so. Finding out that their age-old idol worship has been a labyrinthine journey to nowhere, today's woman finds herself in psychic turmoil. Falling short of her idol, she rabidly turns on humanity, all while keeping up a flimsy pretense, that of caring for the fate of humanity. This state of hypocrisy and contradiction will only lead to psychic and physical meltdown.
Yeah, which it is. Again, we're looking for the empirical evidence. Here we've got it. Here we've got it. They worship this icon, this idol, and with it went humanity out the door.
Mm.
So they're not worshiping the man. You see, so you can see it from the outside, from the pure empirical point of view. They're not worshiping masculinity. That's a fact. And they're not worshiping humanity. That's a fact. You have parodies in their place. You have the fake, the genuine fakes in their place. So the protestations in the street are all part of the matrix of self-deceptiveness. All human beings have it, by the way. But this is where it manifests in the woman's world. You've got to conceal from yourself those facts. See, we always think about deception being deceiving other people. That's the way we've been brought up. No, the whole syndrome starts with self-deception. I can't face what I'm doing to myself. I can't face the contracts that I know are leading nowhere or leading me to perdition. So I will wave my placards and pretend that I am the great champion of women's rights, right? Of male injustice, of political reform. And these minorities. I'm there standing up for them. Every fucking minority is, something I'm bleeding for. But I don't know anything about their history. Not a thing do I know. Even these top people running for the Senate, a lot of them are women, right? You shove the mic into their face and ask them even a simple question about India or Africa or the past, right? Anything to do with the Orient, they don't have a fucking clue what's been said. These people would never have even got to the level of being a politician, except in a place like America. And I know where their funding comes from. These clueless morons like AOC and what have you, right? But you sacrificed humanity. Guess what? There's a retaliation. Humanity sacrifices you at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it bounces back. You don't know the consequences of what you've initiated in your own life. But that's all born out of the self-deception, the waving of the placards. We've said it before. The histrionics in the streets is all the attempt to hide the actual truth from yourself. All that, and this is what the political domain is custom made for, by the way, most of it. It's when you want to avoid the psychological and the real spiritual, you go towards the political. And that's where most people are. That's where they find themselves. So Imagos 1, 2, and 3 in the male world, and almost all the women. This is the arena they like to play in. They don't do what we're doing. I have no interest in that whatsoever. So you can go on and speak, about it. It really won't matter. There's something intrinsic. This message will only get through a very, very few, where something quite incredible has already been happening, in their archetypal level. They'll already sense on a deep level that there's these violations. And there'd be a deeper instinct to say, well, I don't want to follow no fucking perilous idol. I gotta be very cautious of that. Did I inherit this from my family, or did I inherit this from the society, or have I really given it thought? Or why do I feel bad all the time? No discernible reason. The anxieties we talked about earlier on. Just give a quick example of 4 forms of anxiety: the guilt, the shame, and then the sage, the outsiders. 2 forms of anxiety. 1 from holding himself apart. Not being dragged back into the crowd is always a source of anxiety. But also then his more spiritual, over-encompassing anxiety, where he sees the perdition that they're all in. This is what creates a Blake and a Weininger. There's also this feeling of sadness, I believe that was even in a Schopenhauer and some of these other people. I believe it's there. Where they're just looking at the condition of humanity and the difficulty of trying to speak the truth to them. These contracts that people make with themselves. And then, as I said, it really doesn't work out. In other programs, we've even shown that when people commit to the will to power, the will toward power, that is also done as a default measure, hoping to lower anxiety. And the whole world's bought into that. And that, this is what Nietzsche, Freud, Darwin, Schopenhauer, Adler, and dozens of others less famous than that have committed to this. This is basically the Faustian model. Commit to the will to power. Pump it till it hurts. You even get it in these Andrew Tate's iterations of it, right? But when you unpack it and find out what is behind that, you find, again, it's an attempt to lower anxiety of a certain kind. But then you have to question, like I've done in other shows, is that legitimate? And if it's not, is it not going to cause a crisis? But how many have read your Viktor Frankl's? Everybody's read the Nietzsche's, real popular, right? Popular guy. How many ever even heard of a Viktor Frankl? Somebody who's can, raise a finger against that and say, hold on. Maybe there's a different motivation, like I said, a different center within human beings. See, so when you turn down humanity for the sake of this idol of womankind, do you realize, did somebody tell you at the time when you did this that might have a tremendous consequence? No. The idol gets set up despite that. But the goddess that they worship, right, in one form that they think set up that idol, is not their friend, is actually their enemy. Now, this is what I find completely, absolutely, excruciatingly amazing. This is what causes a deep, deep sense of humility. And the woman who is going to go through a radical transformation, right, has got to feel reverent toward that. Got to see what you're dealing with, both the dark side of it and the positive side of it, and make a decision. Because you're not going to escape this. Even if you manage to conquer the whole world in the image of your idol, even if you did manage to do it, I don't think you will, but say you did. Say it turned out that men were so gullible, so passive, so docile, that you managed actually to conquer them all and restore the gynocracy. It's exactly at that moment where you're breaking open the champagne glasses, the bottles, that you hear this bang. The whole experiment is doomed to failure. That's why you need to sign off now. See, and the conscientious woman, the one who's got the conscientiousness within her, that she's truly not following the idol, but following humanity, they'll get the message. But nobody else will. So I'm not, that's why I don't, go mad pushing it. I'm not waving any placard. I'm not getting on any fucking soapbox.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. Only the women who've got this sort of deeper understanding where the anima is being good to them, the true image of the anima is there. And I know that those women exist. So therefore, that's what all you can do. That's all you can do. The rest is in the hands of this supernal force.
Yeah, this force, as you mentioned, the anima. I am on the same page as you. I feel that this is what is motivating this whole trajectory. I think it needs to get to an extreme. I think that's how nature kind of works with the, if you think about like compensation, rhythm, you know, we're getting to an extreme point so that there can be a correction. And we're all already kind of seeing the correction at the same time, though it is the mess simultaneously. It's kind of chaotic at the moment, but as you've pointed out, women are starting to question, are starting to notice their lack of fulfillment, questioning why that might be. Of course, this is not in the consensus. This is not the majority of women, but there are those sproutlings and seedlings that are waking up and noticing that this trajectory that we're on as a gender, as a biological sex, is not fulfilling. It's just not. Yeah.
Yeah, it is doomed to failure at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very possible that there's a major zeitgeist change. The astrology is where to look for that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Closely keeping an eye on those things. But you see, anyone who follows a lie cannot, at the end of the day, be satisfied with it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to leave you flat and jaded. And from that comes a call for something more authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The malnutrition itself can sometimes call for another way of being. So all we can do is provide that insight so that those people who, feel instinctively that they need to make a change, but they don't really know the ropes. That's how then, maybe come to my work and introduce them to that. And then from that, into something more wholesome to nurture what's happened. But this feministic movement has been funded by some very dark forces, and for a very long time. And it is not going to just fade away on its own. As we said, they don't know any other way. And for them, they've replaced the transcendent. And unfortunately, men have actually supplied, they've become sort of allied to this force. Like I said there earlier about the romanticization of sometimes over elevating their connections with women up to a transcendent point of view, which is all fake. That has no background in that at all. And this then has confused the matter and ended up only in befuddling, the masculine mind. But remember, masculine and feminine are typologies. Women can be very masculine. And what the anima wants is for that to come back, but in a wholesome way. And that on the street level means that women have to start now actively admiring and respecting men rather than hating and envying them. That's what it boils down to at the street level grade. And only then do you pacify the anima. She's the great watcher. And when that happens, you're back in alignment with her, and you're, moving back psychically into wholesomeness, in which the anima now befriends you and becomes a friend, and it becomes your true guide as it used to be. And this is where there's real transformation. So what the woman is doing then is going to the real psychic source of the problem, not waiting for groups and quangos and movements and committees to fix things, right? You've already shifted your ground from any political nonsense. If change happens there in a positive way, that's great. All for it. But if it doesn't, that doesn't mean that you're completely lost. It also means that your need to go out and join up with a hysterical crowd, which is all based in self-deception, that'll be wiped out. You won't need to do that. You'll be looking at it going, that's stupid. That's only for stupid people. I don't want to be part of that. It just evaporate. All of certain things will happen. And most importantly, you'll probably then become much more deeply philosophical and seek out the transcendent again in a more legitimate way. That's the ultimate goal, right? But that's way down the line. And then as part of that, as unlikely as it may sound, you will then be naturally attracted to the fourth and fifth imagos. 5 you can cancel, right? I don't think that exists anymore. But at least number 4. And there'll be something natural where you want to, include that kind of man. And that'll be, in its own way, a very good sign. Because the few of those that exist outside will stop feeling so lonely, and so desperate. And they'll be less inclined in and say, well, look, I know these things, but I can't express them. So I'll just sort of suppress all of that in me, nor to be liked, nor to get along, because I just can't stomach it anymore, you see. They'll be dragged down. But if women start saying, no, I want you to be the way you are. I recognize you as a teacher. We're not going to make you lonely. We're going to work with you, right? That is immense. That's part of the restoration. That's part of the repair. And women owe this to men. Because what was the contrary? Remember I said? Hyper focus on 1 and 2, and maybe a bit of 3, leaving out 4 and 5. So they're almost bred out of our culture.
Yeah.
And then maybe we're just going, we can't understand why everything's just so bad. Oh, fucking, I put your head in it. You've literally bred out the enlightened witnesses, right? Because they were too, coming close to home. They tried to correct the nonsense that you were getting involved in, like these Reverend Dabneys and Otto Weiningers and people like that.
Yeah.
And some of them you pushed to such extremes that they came down the other side, instead of seeing it as a transcendent, they were so broken that they then became ardent misogynists and very hateful. Which is not a good thing. So there's a lot of repair needs to be done there. But as I said, as soon as any man, I don't care which imago you are, that happens to them, the women then take the Polaroid, they take the photograph of that and use that in their own arsenal to continually wheel out, the men are the criminals, the men are the malefactors. And they've done this for a long, long time. And then that's why men need to be pushed back at that, so that they can't be using that over and over again to exonerate their own crimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to just add this too, just for anyone who's listening who might not be connecting what Michael's saying when he talks about masculine and feminine. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Michael, but from what Quinn was saying in his book, because he also practices the Tao and he speaks on the I Ching, so I'm getting the impression that where he's coming from with the feminine is it's an unconscious force, right? It's a degenerative force, and so it's that forceness that doesn't want to wake up, that doesn't want to see the truth, that doesn't want to be in reality. It would rather dream. And so it fights against feeling discomfort. I mean, think about somebody being forcibly woken up. You're usually not happy about it. You'll go against whatever's trying to wake you up, or at least snap at them or be annoyed. So it's not like, I just want to say, and the masculine force is more about consciousness and looking at the truth and not being emotionally involved to the point where the truth is obfuscated or blurred. So just for anyone who might be taking this personally as, which could be because, we are getting called the fuck out. I'll just say, like with Quinn's book, like he just lays it out. So it's helpful to not take it personally and see it for what it is on the more foundational levels. So just my comments on that.
Oh, no, he's right, and I believe that. I'm a disciple of Otto Weininger, and I totally do believe that. Blake and Weininger went to great lengths to talk about the difference between these typologies. And one, the downward pointing triangle, right, is the feminine, and it's chthonic. It's lunar, let's say. Right? This is how nature has ordained it. And the upward pointing triangle is the masculine. I think this is across the board. It's not just David Quinn is talking about this. This is the way it's been understood. Now, the freedom is that each man and woman has equal power to be masculine or feminine. These are the typologies. And if it's weak in one or in the other, they can strengthen it. But we can't rely on our institutions to do that. And feminism has eroded the masculine within woman. Right? And if you get the masculine in woman, it's only then of this malignant type, right? Where it's a parody of malehood. It's not authentic masculinity. Yeah. See, if it was authentic masculinity, it would be then the transcendent would be back. And that would be a whole different complexion. It's obviously not. Women are glutting themselves on the world and its trinkets and its ephemeral distractions. How can that be? Right? They're obsessed with sexuality and imagery and the fashions and the cosmetics and all the falsity of the world and having a good time from morning to night. That's not the transcendent. So we know that cannot be said to be the true masculinity, which is involved with the transcendent. See, words can be misused, right? But the truth of the matter can be seen anyway. And it is the feminine that is the downward pointing triangle. It had to be. Nature has ordained it that way. But nature didn't ordain it that women that should then see their biological weakness and hate it. Or condemn themselves or man for it being this way. Or trying ridiculous attempts to compensate against it. Instead of accepting the fact of nature. Then nature will stop working with you. Nature's not dead. It's a very living thing. The self-murder, the self-loathing within yourself, once you have this generationally, or some sort of envy where you say, nature, you should have made me the tough one. Why did you make me the weaker sex? You see? This is where it all has gone wrong. And man is not to blame. He's being blamed for something that nature has ordained. Then woman is keeping up the mask of being the most natural of the sexes. No, that's not true. That's another fakery. Women have been doing something anti-natural. Well, as soon as they hate men for being men, they're doing something that nature has ordained. They're going against what nature has ordained. That is a terrible mother. That's a terrible female. That's a toxic female. Man isn't committing any such crime. He's accepting the situation. He's being the protector, the defender, and the provider. So he's doing what is close to nature. Woman has been violating it for centuries. Do you really think then that fate and nature are going to continue supporting that? Sure, the rope bridges are already burning. Can't people see? Yeah. But the trouble is, a lot of men cannot see. The feminization in men is one of the problems. And then you get its flip side, which is your Andrew Tates. Mm. I don't think of that as being any kind of solution, not a permanent one. So this is what's motivated me then, to get out and give the sort of middle ground, which I hope will be insightful for women and also men. If you're a true doctor, then you just say, here's the problem. You don't get in bed with a fucking patient. You diagnose it. And you say, you want to get well, then take the medicine. But you'll only take the medicine if humanity, you see, is your true concern. If it's polishing the idol or continuing any kind of envious situation towards the higher magos that have found out the truth, well, then you're just part of the problem and will suffer the consequences. I have no fucking worry because I know what I'm serving. If I'm serving the anima, do you think I'm fucking concerned about individual women think? I'm serving the force that put the idea in your fucking mind. I know where I stand. It's called being undefeatable. You can't come against me, not without destroying yourself. That's the real story of nature, right? The way it's been created. That's why I call it even a perilous idol. Behind it is something extraordinary. If this wasn't the case, and this was just a purely, corporeal matter, this would lead to some other kind of Armageddon. And I don't think that women would, actually, my own personal thought on that is I don't think women would come out on top. Because there's secret powers within the masculine that even the masculine doesn't know he has. But they will awaken at that critical moment, when real humanity is in peril. That's what the Lord of the Rings is all about. So women are still dicing with death, even if there was no other transcendent action taking place. Women are still doomed with this, path or trajectory that they've been taking. But because there is a divine transcendent factor here, that assures me, at least what I'm doing, I know is right. And nothing else, is of concern.
Well, I feel like that is a really good place to maybe conclude this episode, unless you've had anything else that you wanted to say.
No, we'll go on with this book, this fine book.
Mm.
In the next program, next time we meet, we'll have more from David Quinn, I suppose. That'll be good.
Oh,
But
yes.
I'm glad we were able to do this summary
Mhm.
so far and get a chance to really dig down even that much deeper into these matters.
Yeah.
See, I feel that way because this has never ever come out before. These are absolutely unique, revelations actually.
Yeah, these are, I mean, I've really enjoyed all the episodes, but I'm really enjoying this particular mini series with Quinn's book. So I'm looking forward to another part for sure. So okay, that's what we'll do next time then. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
And with that, we bring this episode of The Dark Side of the Female Psyche to a close. There's still more to come in this series, so make sure you're subscribed to Willfully Evolving Woman here on YouTube and turn on your notifications so that you'll know when the next episode is ready. More social media accounts may be added in due time, so if that interests you, bookmark willfullyevolvingwoman.com and be sure to check back periodically. If you would like to follow Michael and learn more from him, you can find his works through the following channels: dragonmother.org, femalepsychology.org, and of course, michaeltsarion.com. And if you're interested in Michael's premium presentations and the Unslaved podcast, you can find those by becoming a member at unslaved.com or unslaved.substack.com. I'm Sarah DeHaven, and on behalf of Michael and myself, thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.